Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome to a special Halloween edition of Sims 4 Real Lore. In this series, we dive into fascinating destinations from around the world, shrouded in history, mystery, and oftentimes quite a bit of spookiness. Today's episode explores one of the most iconic spooky locations of both fiction and reality, Castle Frankenstein, the home of an infamous alchemist, and the alleged inspiration of Mary Shelley's timeless horror novel. Between a true mad scientist, several local legends, and alleged spiritual activity, what is the truth behind the many mysteries of Germany's famous historical location? Before diving into today's episode, I do want to note that this video will cover topics regarding the supernatural and paranormal, along with themes surrounding corpses and some unsettling historical experiments, so please keep that in mind while watching. On another note, I am not versed in German, however, I will do my best to pronounce these different names for you guys. Exploring the history of the castle itself, Castle Frankenstein is located in the modern-day city of Mühltal, Germany. In its current state, the castle sits largely in ruins, with 2 towers and a chapel still intact, along with several exterior fortress walls. The castle also sits on a tall hill overlooking Rhine Valley, with its foundation situated in part of Germany's Odenwald mountain range. Diving into the castle's roots, Castle Frankenstein dates back several centuries into the medieval ages, with an estimated construction date of 1250 AD. Built by Lord Conrad II Rise of Bruberg, Lord Conrad would establish himself as a burgrave, or lord of the castle. His power would extend well beyond his estate, with authority over nearby cities such as Darmstadt, Oakstadt, Niederbirbach, Wetterau, and Hesse. Most interestingly, however, Lord Conrad would be responsible for the castle's popular name, Castle Frankenstein. Despite the name's association to the popular novel, the term was actually widely used in Germany to denote castles. The name literally translates to Stone of the Franks, with Frank referring to Germany's ancient tribe, and Stein meaning stone. Interestingly, the meaning of the name holds 2 possible meanings, with Stein referring to the masonry that went into the castle's construction, or alternatively, the expansive mountain it was built upon. Lord Conrad would then take on the surname of Frankenstein, forming the Imperial Barony of Frankenstein and also the House of Frankenstein, which was soon marked by a family crest. For many years, it is said that the newly named Frankenstein family and its descendants would live within the estate, spanning a course of 3 centuries. However, the exact history of the castle has been notably uncertain, with many questions regarding occupancy and usage over the years. Throughout history, it was reported that the Barony of Frankenstein sought a political alliance with the nearby Counts of 𝗧𝗛𝗛𝗡𝗚. The doors of Castle Frankenstein would be open to this allegiance in the year 1292. This gesture, however, would fall less than a century later in the year 1363, dividing the Frankenstein family once more. Despite this division, Castle Frankenstein would be expanded and renovated in the early 1400s. The history following this period, however, is incredibly murky. Reports claim that the estate was eventually sold by the current head of House Frankenstein, Lord John I, to the Landgraves of Hesse-Darmstadt in 1662, a state of the former Holy Roman Empire. This action was allegedly made after a series of legal troubles with the imperial court. Sometime after, the estate was then converted into a refuge and a hospital. Although dates are unclear, it is reported that the property would remain abandoned for an extended period of time, following the closure of the hospital at some point in the 1700s. Castle Frankenstein would experience a second major reconstructive effort in the mid-1800s. This period of construction would introduce the 2 towers that are iconic to Castle Frankenstein today, despite the towers not being historically accurate. While Castle Frankenstein encompasses a history of approximately 800 years, there would be one resident of the estate that would leave a lasting cultural impression, a man by the name of Johann Conrad Dippel. Born in Castle Frankenstein in the year 1673, Johann's family had devoted their lives to the Lutheran clergy for several generations. In his early adulthood, Johann would seemingly continue the Dippel legacy, attending Gießen University to study theology and philosophy. Curiously, however, Johann also took a particular interest in learning alchemy. Through his time at the university, it is said that Johann received much praise from students and faculty alike, given his studiousness and intelligence. Eventually, Johann would take his academic career even further, serving as a philosophy lecturer at the northern German universities of Wittenberg and Strasbourg. At some point during his education, Johann would also expand his studies into medicine and anatomy. However, his prestige would soon backfire, as Johann became particularly egotistical and oftentimes aggressive. His temperament became so problematic that Johann was known to get into several public altercations, particularly due to heated religious arguments. In fact, many sources state that one of Johann's altercations escalated into a lethal duel, resulting in the death of Johann's opponent by Johann's hand. Subsequently, this alleged murder put Johann's academic career in jeopardy. Ultimately, Johann departed from his lecturing positions, returning to the city of Gießen, where his alchemy endeavors only escalated further. Originally, Johann's alchemy experiments were seemingly benign. Much like the alchemists of the past, Johann was intent on transforming common metals into gold and other precious materials. Adamant in his pursuits, Johann promised miraculous results to willing creditors and investors. However, his pride would soon be his downfall once more. Johann was unable to hold up his end of the deal, and, in fear of retaliation from his clients, he reportedly relocated to Berlin, Germany's modern-day capital. Departing from his pursuits in more traditional alchemy, Johann would turn to a new venture, the creation of an all-powerful medicine that could treat any illness. Through his research and experimentation, Johann came across a strange dark oil that could be distilled from various animal parts, mainly blood, horns, and leather hides. Chemically speaking, the oil had a high amount of ammonic carbonate, commonly found in modern-day baking soda. This oil, now historically referred to as Dippel's oil, was used medically throughout the 1800s, mainly as a treatment for hyperhidrosis and muscle spasms. Its true effectiveness, however, is up for debate. By age 31 in the year 1704, Johann Dippel would create another notable substance completely by accident. Working in the same laboratory as pigment maker Johann Jacob Diesbach, the two allegedly mixed up their respective chemicals while in the lab. Dippel's oil was unknowingly mixed with potassium carbonate, creating a bold blue dye that was originally named Berlin Blue. This dye became quickly utilitarian, being implemented in photography, blueprints, inks, and fabric. Eventually, the Berlin Blue dye also became the primary pigment of the Prussian army uniforms. As a result, Berlin Blue was officially renamed Prussian Blue. Apart from his suspicious behavior and interesting discoveries, Johann Conrad Dippel's life holds further mysteries that remain up for debate. One of the most popular rumors surrounding Johann was his experimentation in soul transference. This theory implied that a soul could be transferred from one cadaver to another. While some sources claim that Johann supported this theory in his writings, it is unclear if he did conduct any experiments to test this supposed possibility. What is verified, however, is Johann's fervent dissection of dead animals, which originally led to the discovery of Dippel's oil. Allegedly, these dissections were in pursuit of higher purposes, with some sources claiming that Dippel had found what he called an elixir of life. Additionally, a substance similar to Dippel's oil was said to be able to expel demons, based on Johann's claims. Johann's supposed elixir of life would be mentioned once more in a pamphlet written prior to his death in 1734. Within this pamphlet, Johann claimed that the elixir he had concocted would enable him to live to age 135. However, a fatal stroke a year later would override his claim, taking his life at the age of 61. Johann would then pass away in Wittgenstein Castle in Bad Lasfi, Germany, a town much farther north from his birthplace in Castle Frankenstein. Curiously, Johann's manner of death has been a topic of debate among historians, with some hypothesizing that Johann had actually been poisoned. This theory is plausible, considering Johann's alleged altercations, the investors he abandoned in Gießen, and other possible enemies he may have garnered throughout his life. Additionally, some theorize that Johann may have poisoned himself accidentally, potentially from testing one of his concoctions. Unfortunately, there are no details regarding an autopsy that may or may not prove this theory. Apart from animal dissection, some sources say that Johann may have taken his experimentation one step further, with the possibility that he may have experimented on human corpses. As a result, there is a popular rumor that Johann was found guilty of grave robbing. Allegedly caught by a local minister in the city of Niederbirbach, Johann was eventually imprisoned for his actions. However, these accounts do remain unverified. Regarding Castle Frankenstein, It is not reported that Johann lived on the property during his adult years. Despite a lack of clear information, it is inferred that Johann only lived within the castle during his childhood and early adolescent years, before attending universities outside of the city. It is unknown as to whether or not Johann ever returned to Castle Frankenstein, with most reports stating that his experiments and scientific research occurred elsewhere. Despite the thin connections between Johann Conrad Dippel and Castle Frankenstein, many sources state that English author Mary Shelley was inspired by Johann's life, writing her famous classic novel Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus. As a brief overview, Mary Shelley was originally born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin in the year 1797 in London, England. Mary's father was a political journalist and philosopher, and her mother a prominent feminist at the time. Unfortunately, Mary did not have the best childhood, losing her mother shortly after she was born. Following her father's second marriage, Mary proceeded to have a poor relationship with her stepmother. Reportedly, her stepmother sent her daughter to school for a proper education, but did not provide the same opportunity for Mary. Fortunately, by the year 1814, Mary would meet a poet by the name of Percy B. Shelley. Despite Percy already being married, the two quickly became in love. They desired to travel throughout Europe together. However, tragedy would soon unravel for the young couple. Unfortunately, their first child would die not long after birth. Mary would then lose her older half-sister, and roughly within the same time frame, Percy would also lose his wife. Unfortunately, both women had reportedly forfeited their lives. In a time of grief and loss, the couple would eventually travel to Switzerland, where they would encounter English romantic poet Lord Byron. Upon enjoying a book of ghost stories with Lord Byron and other guests, Byron proposed that the group would write their own horror tales. In addition to Mary Shelley's stay with Lord Byron, it is said that Mary and Percy would also travel to Germany, specifically sailing along the Rhine River. The couple reportedly arrived in the town of Gernsheim, where locals would share the rumors and tales of Johann Conrad Dippel and the nearby Castle Frankenstein. Arguably, Johann Conrad Dippel served as the inspiration behind Mary's fictional character, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, with Frankenstein's monster being a character derived from Dippel's alleged unsuccessful experiments on human cadavers. The backstory of Victor Frankenstein further aligns with Dippel's as well. Victor was written as a university medical student who eventually became obsessed with achieving necromancy. This mirrors Dippel's fixation on alchemy, emphasizing his desire to accomplish results far beyond the natural sciences. However, some sources counter this theory, stating that Mary Shelley did not receive her inspiration from her visit to Gernsheim. Alternatively, some say that Mary Shelley had learned of Johann Conrad Dippel through writings from the Grimm brothers, shared with her by her stepmother. However, this claim has been largely debated. Alternatively, Mary Shelley may have drawn inspiration from several scientific experiments occurring at this time. While the concept of reanimation has been a mystifying topic across many cultures, scientists throughout Europe in the 1700s and 1800s had a fervent interest in studying this theory. These scientists included Luigi Galvani, an anatomy professor in 1780 Italy. From his experiments, he discovered that electricity could make muscles jolt within the body of a dead frog. The word galvanize, which describes the act of stimulating through an electric current, derives from the studies of Luigi Galvani. Such experiments would further escalate in Mary's native country of England. Following the passing of the 1751 Murder Act, scientists were now legally able to conduct experimentation on the corpses of executed and/or deceased murderers. This led to the work of Scottish chemist Andrew 𝗪𝗏, who would expand upon Luigi Galvani's work in November of 1818. In front of both students and faculty at the University of Glasgow, 𝗪𝗏 would insert metallic rods into the head of a recently executed murderer. Charged by a 270-plate voltaic battery, the electricity surged through the nerves, allegedly causing the facial and bodily muscles throughout the corpse to writhe and contort. Curiously, this disturbing display would coincide with the publishing of Mary's first and most famous novel, Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. Released several months prior to Andrew 𝗪𝗏's display in 1818, it is possible that Mary Shelley inspired 𝗪𝗏's dark experiment, rather than the other way around. Mary Shelley's iconic tale would spur several literary, film, and game adaptations in the many years to come, despite having highly disputed origins. Given the history of Johann Conrad Dippel and its alleged role in Mary Shelley's iconic novel, Castle Frankenstein has been culturally viewed as a place of mystery and horror. However, there is a question surrounding the property that has not been thoroughly investigated. Is Castle Frankenstein haunted? Although there is little information regarding paranormal investigations, there have been some interesting accounts in the past few decades. Most notably, the US television show Ghost Hunters International investigated the entirety of Castle Frankenstein in a 2008 episode. Allegedly, the team was able to capture several recordings of EVP, or Electronic Voice Phenomenon. Based on their investigation, most of the reported activity was tied to the small chapel on the property. The team recorded sporadic words and phrases that appeared to be Old German. However, some viewers, including native and fluent German speakers, did not identify any of these terms. Despite the disputed evidence, the team did capture multiple occurrences of a shadowy figure that seemed to appear and disappear within the confines of the chapel. The identity of the shadow is unknown, however. German native and Frankenstein historian Walter Scheel provided some credibility to the team's finds, stating that the visitors to the castle often report odd activity specifically within the chapel itself. Apart from the odd activity surrounding the chapel, there is another strange occurrence tied to the castle's tower. Allegedly, on multiple occasions, visitors have reported seeing stones being thrown from the top of the tower, despite it being empty. Local legends say that a pair of ghosts are actually responsible for this occurrence, who may be attempting to deter visitors with their efforts. This alleged pair of ghosts, however, is not an ordinary haunting. In fact, many claim that the ghosts are tied to one of Germany's medieval legends, the tale of Knight George and his lady, Anne-Marie. Although the date of his birth is not known for certain, Knight George von Frankenstein was born roughly between the late 1400s to the early 1500s. During his lifetime, it is said that a lindworm was plaguing the nearby city of 𝗪𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏. The only alleged way to appease the dragon was to offer it a fair maiden by the name of Anne-Marie, who was also folklorically known as the Rose of the Valley. Unbeknownst to the townsfolk, however, Knight George had secretly fallen in love with Anne-Marie, and vowed to slay the dragon to protect her life. According to legend, the battle was a long, grueling duel, but with a final slash of his sword, Knight George was able to deliver a lethal strike to the lindworm, seemingly killing it. Anne-Marie remained safe from the dragon's grasp. However, the same could not be said for Knight George. As the dragon writhed in pain, Knight George would be struck by the slash of the dragon's tail, which unfortunately proved venomous. The lindworm and the valiant Knight George would then perish within the forest. Based on this tale, it is said that the ghost of Anne-Marie awaits her lover in the tower, unaware of his death. The stone throwing may be her way of defending his estate and deterring possible trespassers. Despite her efforts, the legendary Knight George von Frankenstein is said to be buried within 𝗪𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏. An elaborately carved vault features a likeness of Knight George slaying the lindworm. However, many speculate that the famous legend stemmed from the design of Knight George's crypt, rather than his crypt's design being a depiction of his heroism. Regardless, the tale of Knight George, Anne-Marie, and the dragon remain a vivid part of German folklore. The tale has been closely tied to a Felsenmeer, or Sea of Rocks, located within the nearby woods of Castle Frankenstein. Some say that apparitions of Knight George and the dragon are connected to these rocks, while some argue that the location is a site for mythical spirits. Apart from the alchemist Johann Conrad Dippel and its ties to the legend of Knight George, the estate of Castle Frankenstein and its surrounding forest hold many mysteries, with connections to mysticism, magic, and witchcraft. One of the castle's mysteries is an alleged fountain of youth, which is said to be located within the ruins of the castle. More specifically, the Fountain of Youth is situated in a hidden area within the castle's herb garden, with some sources claiming that the fountain takes the form of a small spring. Many locals agree that the location of the Fountain of Youth has been tied to generations of witches. Reportedly, it is a site of congregation for Walpurgis Night, which occurs annually on April 30th. The celebration has important ties to ancient pagan beliefs, honoring the beginning of spring with important rituals to bless the land with fertility. Alternatively, the celebration has been long tied to witchcraft in a more malevolent light, with festivities more closely compared to Samhain or even modern-day Halloween. Many believe that Walpurgis Night serves as a date of a dark Sabbath, when most witches and dark spirits openly convene. As a result, those celebrating would wear costumes, hang blessed sprigs, or even present offerings of food to either appease or chase away evil forces. Apart from the Fountain of Youth, a strange anomaly lies in an isolated part of the forest surrounding Castle Frankenstein. Reportedly, a small formation of magnetic stones lies in the woods. Any person carrying a compass in the vicinity of the stones will witness their compass malfunction. This phenomenon has intrigued locals, tourists, and scientists alike. In fact, much like the Fountain of Youth, this site has also been a place of interest for many witches, who regularly perform rituals around this formation. With all the mysterious and fantastical tales tied to Castle Frankenstein, the property continues to be a destination for both German residents and curious tourists. Public access to the castle, along with a restaurant within the castle's tower, continue to be popular attractions. Most notably, however, is the massive Halloween celebration that occurs annually at Castle Frankenstein. Paying homage to Johann Conrad Dippel, Mary Shelley, and the iconic monster from her novel, the estate is filled with lights, refreshments, music, and plenty of creepy creatures. Despite the massive popularity of the event, the decades-long celebration is set to end in the year 2024, given the old and historic state of the property that many wish to carefully preserve. With history, science, mysticism, and fiction merging into one, Castle Frankenstein will continue to be a place of intrigue for all who explore it. An infamous alchemist, a legendary knight, its mythical forest, and alleged hauntings will remain a part of the castle's many mysteries for centuries to come. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on the true story of Castle Frankenstein and the many legends surrounding the property. I really hope you guys enjoyed the lore and joining me as we separated fact from fiction. And of course, I do hope you all enjoyed seeing the build come to life as well. Now, just like always, unfortunately the inside is not very historically accurate. I do think I got the exterior and the courtyard fairly close, but everything on the inside is more or less my own creation. With that said, this is still a no CC, no mod, limited pack build, and will be available on the Sims 4 gallery for download. I'll leave you guys now with the final lot specs, along with the final cinematic shots, so you can see how everything turned out in the end. And, as always, this has been towniesimbuilds, signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.